the defendant, Joel Michael Guy, guilty of first-degree premeditated murder of Joel Guy Sr.
Count number 2, please.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Joel Michael Guy, guilty of first-degree felony murder of Lisa Guy. We, the jury, find the defendant, Joel Michael Guy, guilty of abuse of a corpse of Joel Guy Sr.
And count number 7.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Joel Michael Guy, guilty of abuse of a corpse of Lisa Guy.
Hello, 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 sweet baby angels and pumpkinheads. It is your girl, Miss Tetra, Resinstone. And yes, I am back on camera. Hello, hello, hello. Listen, I've seen your comments. I understand you guys like it when I'm on here. I get it. I really do. Here's the thing. The reason why I don't come on camera for every video, a couple of reasons. One is, especially when I'm talking about like a story or a true crime situation, I want to make sure that I hit every point. And sometimes when I'm on camera, since it's kind of like off the cuff, it's hard to ensure that I get everything. And I want to make sure that I do my best to give it justice. So that's kind of why I do see your comments though. And so I will try to be more of a balance, but I am here. I am here. And today we're going to talk about a interesting story that I came across that I was completely gooped. I was gagged. I was put together beyond any of the put togethers that I've ever been. I was just like, are you freaking kidding me? I'm talking about Joel Michael Guy Jr. Now, if you guys don't know this story, get ready. Don't grab a snack because you're going to probably lose that snack because it's a gross one. It's pretty vile, very disgusting. So Joel Michael Guy Jr. at the time is 28 years old and he's a career student. So he goes to LSU. He's been living his best fantasy life, never had a job. He's a bum for all intents and purposes. He's a bum. And his parents really, really loved and supported him. Joel Michael Guy Sr., age 61, and his mom, Miss Lisa Guy, she's 55, and they're at a point in their lives where they're ready to just sell the home, go retire on the family farm, and live out their lives together, as a married couple is entitled to do at a certain point. But for Joel, he wasn't having it. Now, Lisa was really a strong support. And when I say a strong support, I mean she financially supported him to the point that she worked a full 40-hour job and deposited every dime into Joel Jr.'s account. So Joel never had to work. And when he realized he had to work, the ball really started rolling on what would become a very tragic, awful situation. Now, ultimately, they were going to put the house up for the market, to which they did, and they were going to retire. And Joel Michael Guy Jr. was going to have to get a job. And he knew he was getting cut off because I don't know who, but it got back to him that Christmas, they were going to have a sit down with him. Kind of like a come to Jesus and say, listen, son, you've been in college for 10 years. You have no degree. You don't work. You don't do nothing. We're ready to retire. We're old as hell. We want to live our best fantasy lives. You got to get a job. And he knew that conversation was coming. And so he decided to hatch a plan. And the plan was, because Joel Michael Guy Jr. was the only biological son to Lisa. Lisa was the second wife. She only had one child with Senior, and that was Joel. They had a life insurance policy, Lisa did, through her job. And if she were to die or go missing, Joel Michael Guy Jr. would inherit $500,000 if his father had died as well. So that essentially sets the stage. That essentially is why this violent act happens. So he comes home for Thanksgiving because Lisa has said that she's retiring that next week after Thanksgiving. She's going to retire. It's time. We got to go. Bye. So they're ready to move out, and everything was pretty much set in stone. They had made their arrangements. The house was on the market. She had already put her 2 weeks notice in. This was now her last week of work, and she was going to, move on with her life. And at this point, that means if she does die after she's retired, Junior is not entitled to any life insurance money. So he decides that it was now or never. Now, before he comes, he goes to several different places. He goes to a mom and pop hardware store. He goes to a Home Depot. He goes to a Walmart. He goes all around different counties, and he's purchasing items that will be ultimately used in the murder of his parents. He purchases chemicals, peroxide, food grade peroxide. He purchases some acids of some sorts. He purchases these 2 large tubs, large enough to fit in a human body, as well as several knives. In addition, he purchases a meat grinder and some other utensils to carry out his grisly plan. Joel is not the smartest person. He actually writes down his steps of what he wants to do, and he puts it in a notebook, and he takes the notebook with him when he goes to visit his parents. So he's at the house having a good time, talking to the family, just having a normal, what you'd expect your son from college to be living his best life. So his mom is out grocery shopping, and whilst his mom is out at grocery shopping, he stabs his father more than 47 times, ultimately taking his life. Then his mom comes home from the grocery store, and she is called upstairs. Joel might have said, "Mom, I hurt myself. Mom, can you come here?" Whatever the case may be, he ambushes her. As soon as she gets to the top of the stairs, Joel, with the rage, comes after her and stabs her in the chest. He stabs her so hard that he actually breaks her clavicle, and ultimately this attack ensues. He stabs her more than 30 times before he ultimately will cut her clothing off and take her into the master bath. Once she's in the master bath, he proceeds to dismember her, first by cutting off her head, and then by cutting off her arms and her legs and placing her torso, arms, and legs into the tubs and of chemicals. So he puts like these chemicals in these tubs, and he puts their body parts in these tubs. He dismembers his dad by doing the same. His dad was only a head and a torso. His arms and legs had been removed, but his mom, he did remove her head. And disgustingly enough, he takes her head and he puts it into a giant stock pot, and he puts all these chemicals in there to dissolve her head, and he has it boiling on the stove in the kitchen. So he does all this stuff, and in the midst of doing all of these things, he actually cuts himself. So he has to go to the Walmart. So he goes down to the local Walmart. In fact, the same Walmart that his mother was seen on surveillance camera before she was murdered, he goes to that Walmart. He goes now to the murder aisle. He gets his little supplies, his cleaning up supplies. He gets gloves. He gets bandages, peroxides, Neosporin, things like that. He then goes to the cash register, pays self-checkout. He pays with cash, his mom's cash, and then he goes home. He cleans up his wounds, and he leaves all of the bandages. He leaves the receipt. He leaves everything in the master bathroom next to the decomposing bodies of his parents, and he starts to try to speed up the decomposition by adding heat. So he turns on the blow dryer, he turns on the curling iron, he turns on this straightener, he turns on the space heaters, he turns on the heat to the max that it goes, and he turns on the oven to the max, and he leaves everything on, the heat going. By this time, it's now Monday, and Monday was her last day at work. They were going to do a farewell party for her, and they were going to have a retirement outing after work. So when Lisa didn't show up for work, people were alarmed. In fact, her coworkers called her multiple times that morning because it wasn't like Lisa. Lisa was a very responsible person. She would never miss work, and if she did miss work, she would always call and let them know. Even if she's running late, she'd call and let them know. They called her husband, and no one answered. So a very, good friend, good on them, they called the police, and they said, "Can you go do a welfare check?"
I have an employee that has not reported for work today, and I don't like her. I've tried calling her home number, I've tried calling cell phone, and can't get a hold of her. What can we do about that? Can somebody go by and check on them? Yeah, do you know her address? I do. It is one.
So they go to do the welfare check, and as they arrive, they knock on the door, and they notice that there's a bunch of groceries in the floor, and they're kind of like, that's kind of odd. So they walk around back. No one, of course, answers the door, and they see both their cars are there. They're kind of like, okay, well, someone should be home, and they go to the back of the house, and the doorknob is missing. So they're kind of like, why is the doorknob missing? So they peek through the doorknob and they're able to smell an aroma, and it's a very, very overwhelming smell of chemicals. And so they're like, this is very odd. Like, I have this weird smell. What's going on? I'm gooped, I'm gagged. This doesn't add up. What's happening? So they ultimately call the realtor who has the house listed for sale. And they said, there's no lockbox here, but is there any way that you can remotely open the door? They said, no, you need the lockbox. Check the cars. If the car's in the driveway, see if there's a garage door opener. So they're like, okay, let's get it that way. So the police ultimately make entry using the car clicker, and they get in through the garage. And upon entering the home, they get an even more overwhelming smell of chemicals. The police described the smell, something that they never smelled before. It was overwhelming, and it was a smell that haunts him to this day in his dreams. He said he's never been able to get that smell out of his brain, which is like, oh, heartbreaking. So he first enters the kitchen, and he passes, the stove is on, and he sees something boiling, and he doesn't know at the time that it's Lisa's head, but he passes through and he goes up to the top of the house. They clear the bottom house, and then he goes and he says, okay, let's, do the top story. So he goes up the stairs, and at the top of the landing, he's met with a pile of clothes, of bloody clothing, and shredded clothes. So he's like, this is odd. Then his focus is to the right, and he sees at the end of the hallway 2 severed hands in a praying position. And at that point in the gym, he's like, this is odd. What the fuck? We now know there's somebody. We got to find the rest of the person that has the hands. So he knew that there was been a crime. He clears the house, and he ultimately makes his way to the master bedroom. Upon entering the master bedroom, he is able to see abnormally heat, right? The heat is coming out of that room. There's space heaters on. The heat is turned up all the way. That was one thing that he did notice, that it was very, very hot. Then he enters the master bathroom. And when he comes to the master bathroom, he finds these 2 giant blue tubs. And in these giant ass blue tubs, he sees what he describes as a diabolical stew of human remains. It was an arm, it was a leg, it was a torso, and it was basically dissolving in these chemicals. So at this point, it's now a crime scene. They lock down everything. They're now trying to figure out what's going on. As they're collecting evidence at the scene, they do find multiple receipts. They find the receipt to the Walmart that Lisa was at earlier, so they were able to at least determine that she had been alive at that time. And they went to go check the surveillance footage. They're able to confirm Lisa was there, and she was alive, and she was alone. And you see the last moments of her caught on camera alive, and it really is heartbreaking because you realize where she's going when she leaves. And she puts her jacket on, and she's going to go home, and ultimately she's going to be murdered by her son, a son that she loved beyond anything other than like life itself, it would seem, because she went above and beyond for this boy, and he repaid her in the most brutal, vile, horrible, disgusting way possible. They find the receipt to the Walmart, another receipt to Walmart, and they see cleaning supplies were purchased and that they were paid with cash. So then they go back to the Walmart and they ask to see the surveillance camera for that timestamp, and they're able to identify that that is Joel Michael Guy Jr. So now at this point, we know that Joel Michael Guy Jr. is injured, and we know that he has purchased these items. There's bloody rags, there's bandages, there's all that stuff that was found at the crime scene, the receipt, him on surveillance footage, and he basically is now primary suspect number 1. He is charged with the murder of his mother and his dad, and he waits in prison until his day in court. Ultimately, of course, he is found guilty of first-degree murder. And he is also found guilty for destruction of a corpse or something of that nature. And he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. Ironically, Joel did ask for the death penalty if he was found guilty. He wrote a letter to the judge and he said, if I'm found guilty, please just give me the death sentence. And I believe that prosecutors didn't seek, because it wasn't on the table. I think that they didn't seek the death penalty because he wanted the death penalty. He's a young man. He's 32 when he was finally convicted, and he has a very long life ahead of him. So they hope that he thinks about this every day and that he will rot in his cell. The ultimate part that really had me moved by this entire situation, aside from the graphic nature of this case, dismembering and then cooking your mother's head, I just can't imagine. I can't imagine doing something like that. But the worst part was watching the victim impact statements.
I'll never get to go fishing with him, or what he likes to say, have a cocktail. Or it's 5 o'clock somewhere. I was robbed of having my father walk me down the aisle. And Lisa, my last mother on earth, was taken away. She was the most loving and giving person I've ever met. She would give the shirt off her back to anyone, the last dime to anyone. And she was my best friend too. They were both robbed of seeing their grandchildren, their handsome boys, grow up and turn into incredible men. And for them to have to go through this tragedy so young is just, it's heartbreaking. I still have Dad on speed dial. Like, it hurts me every day not to be able to speak to him. The rest of my life is not going to be the same for any of us. And I know there's a void that will not be replaced until that beautiful day when we meet again. Thank you, Your Honor.
I'm sorry.
My relationship is I am Joel and Lisa's daughter. I'm gonna have to put this mask on because that mask is smothered.
That's fine. Ms. Tyler, I'm going to give you permission to take the screen off. There's nobody within 6 feet.
Thank you.
I'm just having a hard time hearing you. I think it's appropriate to make an exception in this case. Go ahead.
Thank you. I don't know if you all have a hero, but I have heroes, and it's such an awful situation to even have to have heroes, but I thank all of you all sitting here and everyone back there that are still here for 5 days and 7 days, and you've been here every time. Every single one of you are my hero. As a little girl, I watched how much Lisa loved Joel Michael. I wanted to be that mom. Joel Michael was Lisa's entire world. Most girls dream of weddings, I think. I don't know. But I dreamed of being Lisa with the picture-perfect family, with the dad coming home at 5 and me having dinner. I wanted to love as strong as Lisa loved. The dinner at Dad's and Lisa's home included meat, which was so different at my house where we grew up poor, and it was just pasta. So when we went to that house, it was like meat and candy, and they provided a loving and caring home with all the extra stuff. My dreams were to spend the next 40 years at Thanksgiving and Christmas laughing with my parents. My dreams were to move Lisa and Dad into my home. I would even banter with them about them moving into my home when they were old, to model for my kids how to take care of your parents in the last days, because I'm moving in with my kids when I get old. But I wanted them to see that, like I got to see my mom take care of her parents. I got to see my mom stand by her parents' bed when they died, and I wanted that. My dream was to hold my mom's, Lisa's hand as she took her last breath. My dream was to hold my dad's hand as he took his last breath. People take moments like that for granted, but I wanted those moments with my whole soul. Not only that, the kid's childhood was taken away. I am angry for my dreams being destroyed, but I'm not the only one that's been affected. This has impacted my kids, and for that I will never be able to forgive. I rest easy knowing that God is okay with my choice not to forgive someone that has murdered my parents. I had to spend the last 4 years saving my kids' soul, their spirits, and their hearts. I have spent the last 4 years cleaning up a mess. No one will ever know what it's like to be a child having to hear that your grandmother's head was cooking in a pot, because the person that did it had the perfect childhood. He, especially not a man with that childhood. And on a super selfish note, you will never know what it is like to have to tell your children that their grandparents have been chopped up and put in acid. Can my kids ever trust again? Would I ever really be able to trust again? I was always so proud of Lisa, and I told everyone that she was the best stay-at-home mom. I mourn for my dad, and know I keep talking about Lisa. I mourn terribly for my dad, I do. But I grieve and rage for Lisa. I rage for her from the mother's point of view. I cry for her because I wonder if when she realized the love of her life, the only son she had, the child that she gave her entire life to, was about to murder her, I wonder if at that moment when her heart was broken, did she even fight? Thank you.
And I want to include that in this video because I want you guys to see that when crimes like this happen, it's not just, you know, the murderer whose life is affected, obviously, and the victims. It's people who loved them, people who were there, people who, you know, were in their lives, and the investigators as well. A lot of the investigators really struggled with this case and struggled with the circumstances of the case. And it was such a senseless murder. For what? You know, for what? The evidence was overwhelming, and it was like he was never going to get away with this. And for what? By the way, before we go, listen, this motherfucker still tried to collect the insurance money. He still tried to collect the insurance money while he's in prison. Now, there are laws that prohibit you to make money off of a crime, so he won't see that money even if he tried. But this motherfucker is still trying to get the money even though he's going to be in life in prison. I can't make this up. This story really did touch me, really did break my heart for the family, for the loved ones, and everyone involved. It really makes things in perspective on the potential of, you don't know somebody. You know, they loved their child and they gave him the world, and the world wasn't enough. He wanted more. And so this sick sociopath, psycho murderer, the way that he acted in trial was also very disturbing. The way he, you know, he was very intrigued. He enjoyed watching the proceedings. He really was engaged in and studied the photos. He was very into the crime scene photos. Very sick individual. And, you know, I have no doubt in my mind that he has a very special place in hell. I just can't imagine doing what he did for any amount of money, but let alone $500,000. Like it wasn't enough. And what he took away from his brothers and sisters is absolutely heartbreaking. The acts were vile. It just really truly turned my stomach watching the trial and watching his reactions in court. All in all, this story was very traumatic, very disgusting. I have not seen something like this in a long time, and it really just made me, my thoughts and prayers, of course, are with the family of the victims, and I hope that they can at least find peace knowing that there has been justice in this case. And I really do hope that they're able to move on. And I know that they will never be the same, but at least move on knowing that there has been justice for their parents. And I really pray for their, you know, their healing, and I hope that they get the healing and counseling to really overcome this tragedy. But I wanted to share the story with you guys. Being kind of around the Thanksgiving holiday, I kind of felt it kind of works. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section below. Please like this video. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Turn those bells on. Consider getting a cute little hoodie, guys, or listen, I have a cute little mug, my pumpkin head mugs. Yes, you can get that as well. Consider checking it out. The links will all be down in the description. That is about it for this case of Joe Michael Guy Jr. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know how you think, how you feel. Sound off in the comment section down below. I want to hear what you have to say. I will see you guys in my next video. Until next time, bye-bye.